hope that we will be able to connect to Mr. Vrška from Brno, who studied forest engineering in the Medal University of Agriculture and Forestry in Brno. It was the field of forests, and he's director of the training forest enterprise Masaryk Forest Křtiny, and also professor at the teacher of the Mendel at the Mendel University, and also he actually deals with renewal of forest management in protected areas, and he's co-founder of the Pro Silva Bohemiaca branch, the Czech branch. His statement is polyfunctional forestry of the future requires political and financial support.
Haló, dobrý den. Je mě slyšet?
Good morning, can you hear me?
Dobrý den, dámy a pánové.
Good morning, afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for invitation for this conference. After agriculture, we are moving to forestry, and I would like to tell you something about polyfunctional forestry in the future. Because currently it needs both political and financial support. Should it fulfill all the requirements of the public. So we may discuss what had happened in Czech forest. We probably know how Czech forest look like, how the future forest should look like. So that's the second question, and what the society expects from the forest, because the expectation is changing quite quickly, and we in fact should respond to the requirements in forestry. So first of all, what had happened with forests? And I will describe primarily the situation in the Czech Republic, because in fact the crisis in forestry impacted Czech Republic the strongest. The situation is milder in our neighborhood countries. Maybe we can talk about the history. We have about 300 years of even-aged forest management, primarily with one wood, usually pine and some other varieties. And we can see that in the mid-18th century, those forests were seeded, planted, because then Europe faced the danger of energy crisis. It was really a progressive move then, and that's why it is always necessary to consider the period what we are evaluating in forestry. So in Central Europe, there was a school called net forest income concept established. It was primarily about pine forests, and then this concept was copied and pasted from then until today, of course with certain modifications. And we can talk about the left picture, third generation of spruces, forest dominated by spruce, caused self-acidification of soil, which is quite a natural element. Nevertheless, if we talk about situation in our forest, then a huge nutritional debt is generated with heavy soil consolidation. So in fact, trees are today growing in the nutritional desert. Also, a system of the high stock density of stock stands was applied. In fact, they are quite resistant to the external elements, but once disrupted, the forest is destroyed. We have to say that today's owners cannot influence what had happened 50 years ago. If, for instance, in 30 years old trees, you just apply the under-level cutting. So today the forests are disrupted, and the forest managers cannot modify the spatial architecture of the forest. We simply cannot delay the decay. We can actually, but we cannot change the long-term low thinning practice. That means small tree crows with two slim stems. With the ongoing thinning, low thinning practice for dozens of years that was applied, which is today combined with climate change, with droughts, and the winds, for instance, trees with low roots are aged and they physiologically die. So that's about the reasons. And looking to the map of Czech Republic in red, you see the cadastral areas with so-called catastrophe status. You can see that with the exception of the highest mountains, today we are facing the calamity almost all over the Czech Republic, the disaster. What is the impact? Of course, we can just simplify to three areas. Of course, environmental impacts, decreased water retention, and damaged soil. Because, of course, the entire forest then face the production potential of a forest. Second area impact, social impacts, because there is a huge imbalance of the labor opportunities in rural areas, because instead of employing local inhabitants, in fact, those services are in fact delivered in the form of a servicing company, and we all know that primarily people from Romania or Bulgaria are employed in those outsourced companies. Third impacts are economic impacts. In fact, it is closely related to social impact also. We all know that right now face the impact areas which is related to individual wood processing industry. Talking about the reasons and current situation in the forestry, we in fact should consider the future of forest management, and we can use the climatic models. This model, for instance, is quite used in the forestry. It is of 2013, and it shows the current optimal conditions currently in Europe for the most frequent trees in Europe: spruce, fir, and beech. Talking about the forecast in Europe in 50 to 70 years. It is a mean system, and in fact, it is happening faster than expected, and the entire beech and oak trees are moving from north to central and maybe southern Europe also. You can see that Mediterranean oak trees are replanted here. It is associated with a single trouble. In 70 years, by standard forest procedures, we cannot change the wood structure of our forests. So the question is what to do now. We have already defined the future forests just to simplify it and depicting it on pictures. So for us, it is really important for us to have richer tree species compositions compared to the past. Then we should combine the trees. Also, it is important for the maintaining of biological diversity. We need individual trees, very much mixture, and it is of course important to blend only those trees that are mutually compatible. And then a spatial structure of forest is really important. Both heterogeneous horizontal and vertical structure is very important. Trees with larger crowns, with more sturdy resistance, and so on. We just call it the principles of uneven aged. We just call it management with uneven, unheterogeneous trees, tree species compositions, the way how to mix the trees and spatial structure of forests. For instance, here we see a picture of the European spruce forests. That's how we predict the future forests, so non-homogeneous, and it should be the mix of individual varieties and species. The transfer of the left to the right picture is predicted based on the scientifically proven elements, and it takes, let's say, 50 years. So the question is how quickly we can handle that, also with respect to climatic changes we have presented a minute ago. This is the picture how to create structured forest with more varieties of species in 40 years. This is the example of Jeseníky mountains. This is the example of lowlands, how to work with spruce in the future, for example, because it's the most important trees in the wood processing industry. So the future is not about having a spruce or not, but how to, in fact, intersperse them in clumps in the future to maintain spruce. Spruces. This is 70 years once the monoculture of spruces started to be modified. Those are the leaf trees of lowlands, working with the target trees. For instance, the false hardwood and beeches, those who applied the uneven forest management, they no longer promote the current practice with the average trees being planted, but instead highlighting selected trees, which saves cost and increases the yields. We really try to achieve the thickness volume as soon as possible, and therefore we achieve the optimized growth rate as soon as we can. How the forest of the future may look like. We have already suggested that we have to work with lower number of trees per hectare because we will plant more light-demanding tree species. Then we also have to consider less rainfalls in the utilized vegetation period, then large canopy crown formations, trees, because the center of gravity of those trees is located lower, which is related to higher mechanical stability. This will allow us to highlight the importance of working with specific selected trees and allow us to use selection principles. We will then be able to work with precious trees and generally growing precious portfolio of trees, so-called pruning and so on. And then we will, of course, work with a higher quality, achieving higher prices. Then we would have a forest that could not be adapted any longer because we don't have enough time. So then we would, in fact, decrease the rotation period because we will at least achieve a certain amount of yield, financial outputs compared to their total decay. Then, in fact, our act at this registering or regulating the even forest management, we have to state that the current method and in fact number of forest managers already promote this new even-aged forest management, which needed to be supported by modified legislation. Then Pro Silva Europe Association, which is the association of forest managers from entire Europe that promote non-even-aged forest management since some time ago when it was approved. In fact, we are promoting this trend in all 25 member states of pro-silva managers. Somewhere we are successful, somewhere we are less successful. Pro-silva Europe is definitely playing a role of partners for politicians at the level of Europe. So, in fact, we have identified those principles not in 1989. Some principles are discussed in the last declaration protecting forest in Europe. In fact, we should focus the challenge from the onset of so-called organized forest management. That means 300 years already. So first of all, we are facing climatic changes more dramatic than we have expected. Then we, in fact, face huge and will face huge economic losses because, in fact, bark beetles are destroying 50 to 60 years old trees, which do not provide any economic yield yet. They do provide it once they are aged 90 years. So, in fact, by the bark beetles, we are having no financial income in the future. Current crisis and current period, we call it the beginning of loss of economic forest management, because in fact the competitiveness is being lost. The value of wood compared to other commodities is dropping, while the price of labor is increasing, and the current contributions and subsidies are sufficient just for plain reproduction, not for huge reinvestment, and thanks to so-called bark beetle payment for mitigated impact of the disasters, they are underestimated compared to payment for agriculture. So I have prepared the overview speaking about the ecosystem services, so the elementary supply by the products used by the society, like society is in fact supplied by wood, electricity and so on. So it's wood and game, then the basic ones, soil and its production potential, biological diversity, and this is maybe seen on the corn fields. Then regulatory, that means modifying the climate, because the forest serves as a great noise and dust filter, and the fourth benefit as a cultural benefit because recreation of inhabitants and related activities are really important. They are sometimes overlapping with the economic management. We are just facing the challenge how to interconnect and merge all those interests. In West Europe, they implemented flat payments, which in fact is so-called market prices. In Central Europe, we are striving for it. This is an example. For instance, those are data of 2019. In Neuchâtel, Swiss canton, it is well known as the window display for forestry. They are just applying the uneven forest management of mixed forests. We can see it in the average yield on 1 cubic meters of wood, 90 Swiss francs. Then we also consider tree cutting and timber skidding cost, which is important, of course, for the owner. The local authorities and the municipalities in Canton require high environmental services. The owner of the forest receives 30 Swiss francs for not sold cubic meter of wood, and this is co-paid by the municipality, canton, and the Swiss state. So municipality wish to have recreational areas for local inhabitants. Canton wish to keep and maintain the species varieties, and state wish to have a certain level of carbon kept by the forests. So without those contributions, the forest will not be able to. So that's the output or result. So we are facing a crisis in forestry, not caused by a single root cause, caused by a mixture of elements. So we have to consider amendment of legislation, strengthening requirements of the function of the forest and environmental services. We can see it on the picture. We see the difference. I definitely do not want to doubt the agriculture production for our nutrition, but in fact, all environmental services are in fact found in the forest. So on the left-hand side, you see the image of university forest demonstrating fulfillment of environmental services. Nevertheless, I have to say it costs a lot of money and we don't receive any contributions for it. Once we neglect anything, then citizens constantly ask us why we did not cut the grass or why there are still barriers, wheelchairs cannot drive there, and so on. So, in fact, nobody contributes any money for us, and we will be pleased to maintain and manage the forest well once getting sufficient money for it. So we need to amend the legislation, and we definitely need to promote the environmental services, and we should, in fact, promote the uneven-aged forest management. I think forestry really needs to receive more financial contribution. We should be equal with agriculture. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll be pleased to speak to any interested politicians. So Pro Silva Europe is definitely open to your question. Thank you for your attention. I would like to come back to Mr. Vrška message. How hydrological conditions may improve optimizing wood forest management. Maybe I will not talk about hydrology, but about retention ability of forest, water retention. I mean, underground water retention. What is key for laymen not to cut trees vastly. So we should implement reasonable forest management, even when working with spruce population as an important tree. We definitely should follow the age-growing forest management philosophy to fulfill the climatic conditions, maintenance of the forest microenvironment, when maintaining the water circulation method. And in fact, it impacts the entire environment around. What we call uneven aged management, I think it's closer to the nature. Thank you very much. Sufficient. So we have next question that I do not understand. Do you think that method from Slovakia of Mr. Stefan Valla will be used for protection of our forest? I apologize. I don't know what method is referred to. Well, I don't know exactly what is meant by that. Hopefully, I will manage to answer right. Maybe it's a response to political decision. So that was adopted by the current Slovak government. It's Ministry of Agriculture, Life Sciences. So they call it close to nature forest management. Of course, it has got a lot of forms, and it will be 100% applied within the entire Slovak territory. From the view of uneven aged forest management, it brings a lot of questions because, and it's necessary to keep it in mind, transfer from even to uneven aged forest management, it looks differently also from the layman point of view, but also we have to see trees differently also from the cutting point of view. I don't want to explain it in details. We just present it to our students, but forest managers that are really good in the even-aged forest management, but they are not that skilled in the uneven-aged forest management. I don't want to criticize them, but I will be really careful to order the uneven-aged management because a lot of people may not know how to do that. I will just educate them gradually. Instead, it should be supported by incentives, and people will be motivated to learn the uneven-aged management. I have, in fact, spent years trying to understand how to implement the uneven-aged forest management in practice. I have seen it also abroad, and only after years, I know a little bit how to implement the uneven-aged forest management. It is, of course, associated with the polyfunctions of the trees and forests, like environment protection, recreational use, and so on. It's definitely the way to go in the future. But in fact, if you was forced to apply the even-aged forest management for years, then people cannot simply switch to uneven-aged management over tonight. Thank you very much. It's similar to the math teachers that they were asked overnight to teach the set mathematics. So it's like trying to force people that are not ready to apply something they do not know well. Then we have other question. Speaking about forest management, do you think awareness may improve the situation? Awareness among forest experts or in general public? Well, I thought in general public, among general public, but of course among forest managers, it's up to the responsibility of the active organizations. Thank you very much. About a year, about 1 hour before this conference, chief editor of Forest Management magazine called me, and we discussed about the way how to explain to public a need to change forest management, how to do it, why to do it. And we are constantly considering ourselves and regarding expectations of public for system services. We are, in fact, lagging behind explaining to public what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, and so on. And I have to say that the first COVID wave may serve us to improve the communication with public, focus on it in more professional way. We are a university forest, a huge hill with forest, about 10,000 hectares of forest. No other university in Europe has something like that. It's located in Brno, and during the first COVID wave, thousands or 10,000s of people had only one activity to do. 10,000s of people walking in the forest. They called us. How does it come? There are tractors running around. How does it come that people, workers are planting trees without face masks and so on? So then we realized that we did not communicate it well. There are different requirements. For instance, bikers wish to have their trails. Then there are the wheelchair assistants. They want to have even surface. Then people are running, and then in fact there are other people who want to be alone, not to be disturbed, and so on. And we then should do the appropriate forest management, cutting trees, and also hunting game and so on, because without hunting, the game will eat all the new trees and so on. So we simply did not discuss well so-called traffic rules, and we have to do so, because without that we will not do it right. And in fact, for years, there are social and political discussions. Should the nuclear power plant be completed? Do we want to promote nuclear energy or not? But on the highest political level, there is no discussion with the society and politician experts from forests. And I think this should be a topic for the future, because without that, there will be a lot of extreme views. No matter whether it is considered from the view of loggers or recreational users or managers. Thank you very much.